If one was asked if they are pro-democracy, I would expect most people in the world would say they are pro-democracy. Places where people would be reluctant to respond might be places like Afghanistan or Burma or a couple of other places. What made me, however, do this video was this map by the Economist Intelligence Unit, dating from 2024, about democracy in the world. And we see here that Ukraine, which currently is under martial law, is more democratic than, for example, its adversary Russia, that had elections a year ago. And that already makes one suspect that what we see here may only be make-believe. For example, we see here Papua New Guinea. New Guinea is an island inhabited by Papuans, indigenous people. The free part of the island, the eastern part, Papua New Guinea, has a democracy index of 6. But the occupied part, the part that is occupied by Indonesia, a quite different people of a completely different ethnic background, completely unrelated language, that part has a better democracy index, even though that part of the island is occupied and they cannot have a government or elections. And we tend to see this trend in a few other places, especially although there are parties in Venezuela, they are not as democratic as the United States of America, for example, that only has 2 parties. So how is this index calculated? Apparently, this index takes a broad view of democracy, including several dimensions. I am reading from their manifesto. These are free and fair elections, civil rights and protection from the state, participatory democracy, citizens engage in elections, deliberative democracy, citizens engage in civil society and public discourse, and effectiveness. Governments can act on citizens' behalf. Now, what is the index of that? How do we know? Are there regular referendums? So let's start thinking about what democracy is. Before democracy, in the time after Bronze Age collapse in Greece, in very many places, kings were replaced by councils of elders. So there were sometimes kings in parallel with a council of elders in some places. In other places, there were only councils of elders. For example, in Macedonia and in Epirus, there were also kings in addition to the councils of elders who were called pelagones, which means elders, literally, and the local languages, the local dialects, Greek dialects. In Argos, on the other hand, there was no king after the Bronze Age collapse. Previously, the area was perhaps under the tutelage of King Agamemnon, or more directly ruled by King Diomedes. In any case, after that, there was a council of elders called Valakri, which means the bald ones, the ones that were balding, so the elders. In Athens, too, during this period, there was a council of elders. There were 10 elders, more precisely, and they were elected by the constituents of each of 10 regions. These were regions of Attica. So, when we talk about city-states, sometimes we think intuitively that the main thing was the city. But the majority of the population might have well lived outside the city in farmland and in smaller settlements outside the main city. In the case of Athens, the area that Athens controlled encompassed the area of Attica, quite a large area that included also smaller cities such as Megara and Eleusis, as well as smaller settlements, and extended as far north as Marathon and Oropus to as far south as Cape Sunion. It was a very considerable area. In antiquity, that area had been divided into 10 constituencies. That was before the classical era, during the dark ages of Greece. Every constituency would elect one representative because of the distances the citizens could not readily gather together and make common decisions throughout this area. So they would elect a representative, and their representatives, 10 of them, would meet in Athens, in the center of Athens, and they would make common decisions on behalf of their electorates, on behalf of their constituencies. And this was a system called oligarchy. It was not called democracy because only 10 people participated in this council of elders on behalf of their constituents. They had been elected, but there were only 10 of them. So, today, by comparison, we have a system where we have perhaps bigger countries. So we may have 300 people in the parliament. We get to elect them once every 4 years. So we have a participation in our democratic systems once every 4 years, for one day. The participation begins and ends with the election of a representative who can then make decisions on things that were never an issue when they were elected, perhaps. They were never part, perhaps, of their campaign. And we would only be able, in most cases, to oppose their decisions in the next round of elections, 4 years later, if they make some decision that we had not anticipated on an issue that had not arisen yet. What was then democracy in ancient Athens? Once Athens became much more urban, and by then, quite possibly, the majority of the population of Athens was actually residing in the city, a new system of government arose, and that was democracy. Direct democracy. The citizens of Athens would gather, potentially every day, in what was called the parliament, which was a very large open area that could fit easily thousands of people. So it could have been as an area bigger than a modern stadium. The area is still there, it can be visited, it has not been built up. It is quite a spacious area. Easily you could fit 5 or 10,000 people. The total male population of Athens, the ones eligible for voting, including all men, those who worked and those who couldn't, those who were sick and those who were healthy, everyone at the highest point of the city of Athens as a city were projected to be about 100,000. So you could fit a considerable fraction of the entire population of voters, even at that high point in that very spacious area. There would be debates. Everyone could stand up and speak. If there were too many people who wanted to speak, out of the ones wanting to speak, a number would be selected by lot. They would speak, there would be debates, and at the end of the day there would be a vote by the Athenian citizens. You could say in modern states we could not really do that. That might have been the case 50 years ago. We could not get 10,000 people from around the country together on any particular day, or 100,000 or millions together on any particular day in any particular place. But we are no longer at the point where we have to gather physically. It would not be inconceivable that one could attend a debate either physically or online, ask questions, answer questions, participate and show that they are actively present in some way, and at the end be allowed to vote. At least the logging of some voting of this kind would be of some interest. It is also not impossible to have a nationwide referendum or a Europe-wide referendum, but when was the last referendum we had in the European Union, for example? There has not been one. There has been occasionally a referendum in a particular state. The last time there was a referendum in my country, in Greece, it was in 2015, over 10 years ago. The question was whether to accept a particular rescue package proposed by the European Central Bank and other institutions in the European Community. All of the Parliament, all parties, were in favor of the package. Nearly 62% of the electorate voted against it. And what happened? The Parliament accepted the package, with very small modifications that were never vetted by the people. Is that democracy? Do we live in democracies?